Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Here, you're in the right place. This is going to be a panel full of fireworks. I mean, what else can you expect with this beautiful accent of mine? Surely you think I'm from Alabama. But today we have a really illustrious group of people here on stage to talk about the topic of legacy systems and liberty. When we see it all around us, that the legacy systems are crumbling. I mean, the main reason why we're here is that the legacy system of fiat money is crumbling in front of our eyes, and we need a plan B. However, there are so many other bad examples of legacy systems. For instance, we have like forced education. What people say is public education, right? We have healthcare, and we have so many other different things that are really problematic right now. And we're going to talk today about how we can solve some of these issues as Bitcoiners and in general. And here with me today, we have a really fantastic panel. To my left here, immediately, we have Mark Moss. Mark is the host of the first national syndicated radio show for Bitcoin, and he also hosts one of the fastest growing YouTube channels that you can find if you Google his name or if you just type it into YouTube. I had the great pleasure to be on a show with him yesterday, and this man knows what he's doing. Then we have also to his left, we have Eric Dale here. Eric Dale worked within the legacy system. He was the former advisor to the president of the European Commission. And so he was there when there was a Greek debt crisis, when Ukraine was attacked for the first time. And now he is a full-time Bitcoiner, Bitcoin educator, and he has a great conference called the Another Lightning Conference. And then, last but not least, certainly, we have James Lavish here, who is the managing partner of the Bitcoin Opportunity Fund. And he has over 2 decades of experience in institutional investing and in risk management. So please welcome this illustrious panel with me. All right, let's jump in here and feel free to disagree with one another. We want to make it a little bit interesting here. So maybe I start with you, Mark. And so besides, of course, like money, because we all understand that that's the most important thing. Because like we know that Bitcoin is the single best shot at achieving liberty in our lifetime. But besides that, what is the second worst legacy system in your opinion?
In my opinion, I would say the second worst legacy system is one that you just mentioned, which is the education system. As a matter of fact, a recent interview I saw with Secretary of State ex-Secretary Mike Pompeo, and they asked him, who do you think is the most dangerous person in the entire world? Would you say it's Putin? Would you say it's Xi? Like, who would you say it be? And he said, no, it's neither of those. And he said her name, which I didn't know. I had to go look it up. And it's the director of education in America. The single most dangerous person in the entire world because they control the education of the entire world, right? The kids coming up through the system. And so the problem that we have on my YouTube channel, I open my videos saying everything you've learned is wrong. And so unfortunately, the education system doesn't teach us what we need to know to survive, and what they teach us is wrong. So everything they've taught you about the financial, or what they haven't taught you about the financial system is wrong. What we eat, food, etc. And so, yeah, education system, I would say, is the most dangerous legacy system.
Excellent answer. And I think probably... How many in the audience agree with education as the second worst one? All right, you have some people here backing you up.
And everyone else is wrong if you didn't put your hand up.
All right, pick it up with him after that. Don't make me responsible for that. So Eric, what do you think is the second worst legacy system that we're dealing with right now in terms of harmfulness for humankind?
First, great point by Mark. The educational system is very broken. But I'd like to zoom out even more and say the welfare state itself has over-leveraged our entire population, our entire countries, everything, not just financially, but we have, especially in Europe, a system that changes all our incentives for how to direct our lives, which has caused a lot of people to become completely dependent for survival on the state. The state itself is the only reason why the population has boomed to what it is, and they are only existing because they're over-consuming from the future and over-leveraging the system even more. And the tragedy of that sounds nice enough when you're on the receiving end of it. So right now, a lot of these people are being kept alive, so the welfare state sounds like a good thing. But like we all know, deleveraging doesn't come for free. It comes with a huge cost. Now, I don't want to predict what that cost is, but if the welfare state collapses in a spectacular fashion, as I believe it will, then the cost could be far greater in human lives than a lot of people are willing to contemplate right now.
Very true. So education, welfare system. So how many think that the welfare system is the most broken one? There's a few there.
That's why it's counterintuitive, man.
Do you think, though, that the education system is responsible or partly responsible for the welfare state, right? If these people had learned a better system from their parents or from the education system, how to create value, et cetera, maybe it would have helped solve some of that?
Well, that's one of the curious things about education, that it does provide sufficient cohesion for our understanding of the world, that we can work together, but it also means that we get part dependencies and people believing things that they take their whole lives to unlearn. So, yeah.
All right, last but not least, James, what are you thinking?
Last and least, I would say that the political system is the worst second system that we have out there, and it enables both the poor education system, it enables the welfare state. I mean, just here in the United States, and being United States centric, we have, and I took some notes this morning. First of all, there are over 50 members of Congress that are worth over $10 million. Okay, there are 10 that are worth over $100 million. There are 2 that are worth over $200 million. Are you fucking kidding me? These people make on average $200,000 a year. How is that possible? Well, it's possible because of nepotism, self-dealing, and lifetime appointments. Okay, I wrote about this 20 years ago in my senior thesis at Yale about term limits. And so right now we have the average age of senators is 65 years old. It's over 65 years old. There are 100 members of Congress and Senate that are over 70, and there are 15 over 80. Okay, we have a problem structurally here. These people are lifetime appointees, and they are funded by the companies that they protect and funnel money to and cause problems all across the system and enable the manipulation of the monetary policy. And that, to me, is the worst of them all.
That's a good point. I want to just bring into some contrast. So just for contrast sake, the average Fortune 500 CEO, I believe, is 55. At 70, you are pushed out. You are not running a Fortune 500 company at that point. But I guess government, sure, that's fine.
Is it possible, do you think, to have a political system the scale of the US without ending up with a political class that is so wealthy and nepotistic?
Well, I mean, it's natural to have some sort of concentration of wealth, but we just continue to feed the manipulation of money. And that's the problem, in my mind, of the political system, is that it enables the central... The first worst, right, we would all agree now, because we're Bitcoiners, is the monetary system, right? Central bankers, but they're enabled by this. You know, the Treasury, they're up against the wall here. Why? Because of Congress. They can't pass a debt ceiling. Like, that's a problem. And so what are they going to do? They're going to manipulate. They're going to print. They're going to, monetize debt ad infinitum, right? In infinitum, because we operate on such huge deficits, and it's all wrapped into the system. So when Jeff Booth talks about, people politically, they get on both sides, either side of the aisle, and they fight about whether you should be a Democrat or you should be a Republican and which party is better or worse. They all suck. And the problem is that the system itself is what needs to change. That's the issue, and which is exactly what you're talking about.
All right. Yeah, so public servants, all of them are ancient. Some of them probably don't even find their way to Congress or to the Senate anymore, but that is certainly a huge issue.
But they're really good at stock picking.
Suddenly, yes.
They're really good at that.
Phenomenal.
You need them as advisors to your funds, respectively. Yeah.
Nancy Pelosi's got a better track record than Warren Buffett. Wow.
That tells you a whole lot about that. So, by the way, I was so excited to introduce everyone else. My name is Dr. Wolf von Laer, and I'm the CEO of Students for Liberty, the largest pro-liberty student organization in the world. We have libertarian students in 103 countries, and so we are talking always about these ideas and try to educate the young to change their minds and get out there and fight socialism here in this country and around the world. So, now we have got like a good sense of where the panel stands. But Eric, you have a thing that you want to chip in with?
Yeah, I just want to blow your horn a little bit. Back in my day of working at the European Commission, I slowly got radicalized by going through the Greek debt negotiation, the migration crisis, the invasion of Ukraine, and your memes from Student of Liberty slowly started popping up on the wall inside the European Commission until I finally realized that I have to leave. So thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. And tell us a little bit more about that, because the next question is directed for you. You worked in a legacy system. There were all kinds of like very established politicians there, the European Commission governing everything across Europe in so many countries that are so very different. Tell us a little bit about the experience and like what made you leave all of that.
Well, in a sense, I think it connects back to the problem with the legacy systems. I had a thought that the real problem is that crime pays. Dishonesty really pays in the system that we have. In fact, the more you're willing to debase yourself from the truth, the more likely you are to succeed. That's the worst sort of heart of whether it's monetary or educational or whatever else. Now, at the top of the European Commission, I had some really shocking experiences. Perhaps the biggest eye-awakener was a referendum they had in Denmark, where the population voted to keep some exceptions from a treaty. Technical stuff, not interesting. But the next morning, the president gathered every single person of import in the European Commission. They lost the referendum. The Danes did not want to remove their exceptions. They gathered everyone up, and the first thing he says is, how can we make sure that this referendum does not set a precedent? And the suggestion from everyone was to make sure we did not give any concessions. People would not, it was very important that nobody ever got the impression that just because you voted for something, something would change. So if we would give them these concessions now, that would just cause another country to vote, and that's the last thing we want. And that was, for me, a moment of like, who are we actually working for here? That was early on, right? But that was really like, okay, it's time to take a check in the ground.
Yeah, surprise. Democratic institution doing anti-democratic things. But yeah, that's certainly a shock.
For anyone who's familiar with the EU, it's the most natural thing in the world. But it was a shock for me young.
Yeah, that's certainly disillusioning in itself.
And Greece also.
Yeah. And so, Mark and James, you have been successful investors for many, many, many years. Tell us about maybe some of the opportunities that you see. Like, where should investors think about? Like, what kind of legacy system could be disrupted by some of the innovations that you see on the horizon?
I'll start from an investor's viewpoint, but also from an entrepreneurial lens. And I think if you look back through history, you can see at times when governments have gotten too big and really too oppressive, what happens is it forces people outside of the system. And so if you look at the USSR, for example, into the 70s and into the 80s, as communism was sort of at its peak and it was at its worst, it forced people out of the system, and so there wasn't enough food or whatever supplies were be. Or, for example, they were very restrictive on censorship, on what films you could watch, et cetera. And so what happened is black markets, as we're typically referring to them today. Back then it was parallel systems or parallel economies. And so what happened is, as these legacy systems failed to meet the needs of the people, or as I said, became too oppressive or too restrictive, then people left and started working outside the system. And we see this all over the world today in the most authoritarian regimes. In prison, you have these parallel systems that work there. And the thing is, back to the question what are some of the best investment opportunities? Well, I think that is the single best investment opportunity today. So if you're an entrepreneur, you have the ability to go create businesses that are parallel to these. So, for example, Bud Light wants to go woke and they want to run with their new spokesperson. Well, people were mad about that. Well, I don't want to support that. Well, if there was a beer that would stand up and support the opposite, then all those dollars could flow to that. But the problem is no entrepreneur stepped up and filled that void. So all those consumers are left, well, shoot, I don't want to buy Bud Light, but who should I buy? Is there anyone better? And so that's kind of one example. I don't want to support the education system. I can pull my kids out of school, but I don't really have time to homeschool them. I wish someone would create like a homeschool pod. I'd gladly pay $1,000 a month to send them there, but no entrepreneurs have stepped up and provided that. And so I think there's the biggest opportunity that I've ever seen in my career for investors to literally go take any business that are disrupting these legacy systems, health, education, finance, et cetera, create a parallel business. So that's a business opportunity. And then as consumers, we should all support those businesses, voting with our money. And so as an entrepreneur, that is a big, massive investment opportunity. As investors, we could also invest into those parallel economy businesses as well. And then, of course, as consumers, we should support them. I believe that's the number one way we can change the world.
Yeah, and digging just deeper into that, you have people talk about how Bitcoin needs to grow. Like, how are we going to grow this system? How are we going to get more users on the network? And really, it starts grassroots, like Mark is saying, with the people who need it most, right? So it's going to start in places like Lebanon and Venezuela and Argentina, because there's so many citizens that either they have their money that is in the banks, and wow, we're learning this in the United States all of a sudden, that your money in the bank is actually a loan, and they can take that, they can seize it, or it can just disappear because of massive inflation. So one of the things that I think is going to happen in this world is the payment system, because it's natural when you become unbanked and you're transacting with each other on the Lightning Network in particular, then that just grows and it eats into what? Visa and MasterCard fees. Visa and MasterCard charge something along the lines of 3 to 5% per transaction, right? And if you're a merchant and you want your money, it doesn't settle for 3 to 5 days. If you want your money faster than that, then it's like a payday loan to get it from the banks, and they charge you like 20% annualized to get that money earlier. It's insane. So. And how long does it take to send a wire? I mean, have you ever tried to wire money on a Thursday and have it not show up until Tuesday or Wednesday? I mean, that's ridiculous. You can settle something on the Bitcoin blockchain in a matter of minutes. 10 minutes, you can have it settled. It's in somebody else's account, and the fees were minimal. And even if the fees were high, like we saw last week, because the blocks got clogged up with ordinals, even if they're high, they're still, if you're paying close to what the fee is for a wire, it's still settled in 4 hours. You're not waiting days and wondering where it went. So I think that's a really, really high likelihood of being disrupted, and that's why Jamie Dimon and Warren Buffett hate it.
Yeah, very, very excellent points here. So one of the theoretical reasons why legacy systems exist, and as a recovering academic, I guess I want to make a theoretical point, is because of concentrated benefits in the hands of the few, often ancient people, but dispersed costs. The costs on us are so dispersed on like all the subsidies that we're paying, or like the foreign money that goes everywhere, or like the education system. Everybody's bearing a little bit of the cost, but the people like on the top, the unions, whatever, they are reaping the benefits. This dynamic has led to both the European Union, or Europe in general, as well as the United States, to have a lot of legacy systems that are crumbling right now. So I want to ask the panel now, and maybe starting with you, James, and going backwards. Do you believe that the US and the European Union generally have a good chance to shake off some of these legacy systems and compete with nations that are like more agile, younger, and coming up right now?
I think Eric is better suited to answer this one. I mean, I've talked about the European Union, but I don't live there. And
talk about US. Yeah, talk about the US as both legacy systems in both areas. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people feel like they don't have a voice, and that's kind of what you're getting at here. And you're just getting eaten away, by penny, vote by vote. And the numbers are so great, it's extraordinarily difficult for any single citizen to understand that we have $31.5 trillion of debt. Just let that sink in for a second. I'm being cognizant of the time here. We don't have much time, but just let that sink in. $31.5 trillion of debt. It's so big, it's so concentrated, it's difficult to grasp. And that's why it's difficult to get people to understand that if you do have a movement like this, if you do all band together, you can create change, and it does matter. But your voice does matter, and vote with Bitcoin, period.
All right, a little bit of hope there. That's good. Eric?
So I'm going to talk about the Protestant Reformation. That, I think, tells us a lot about our opportunity for throwing off these legacy systems. And I see a split happening between US and Europe that I think will be similar to the Protestants versus the Catholics, to be quite honest. You will have some people who live in a legacy system where the corrupt institutions that have provided absolutely everything from people, from roads to education to whatever else they've relied on in their lives, they will not be ready just because we now have the possibility of creating congregations, or citadels if you prefer. Just because you have that doesn't mean that everyone who lives around Rome is going to become a Protestant. So there will be a split, and in Europe, we have now a political tradition that goes back longer than this country has existed. That has that's a very heavy machinery to move culturally, not institutionally. And so I think Europe is going to end up on the Catholic side of this, and we're going to probably see the same outcome over long terms, where today we can see that the parts of the world that went with the Protestant Reformation have a much higher GDP, higher economic growth, higher innovation than the ones that went with Catholicism. But on the other hand, the ones that went with Catholicism has a higher sense of community, they have far bigger civil organizations, there's benefits to both, and I think that split's going to happen. And also, finally, I think we should realize that shaking off the legacy systems may mean things that we don't like a 30 years war. And it didn't happen peacefully last time.
Very good.
Hopefully we can do it better.
We have strength in numbers. We have a reformation process. What's your vote, Matt?
Yeah, I'm going to say we certainly can. However, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a lot of work. But certainly we can do this. We've seen it like in the Protestant Reformation, obviously the American and the French Revolution. So it's happened throughout history. It happens over and over and over. The problem is that we're getting to a point, what I like to call is the blow-off top of socialism. And so what happens when blow-off tops is that markets keep going up faster, 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 keep sucking in more participants. But at some point, markets stop going up when there's no more buyers. So in 2017, Bitcoin's running up. It pulls in all the buyers that were in Bitcoin at that time, and then the market blows off. And I believe we're in the same point with socialism at this point, where it's like, hey, take care of my kid's school, and hey, take care of my health care, and oh, by the way, take care of my education. Oh, and yeah, get my retirement for me. Oh, yeah, and my insurance and everything else. And we've given everything we can to the state, our health, everything. There's nothing else we can give to the state at this point, and it's time for that system to blow off. And so while it looks bad, and it is, it's the Leviathan, we can change it, but it's going to come down to us doing the work. And so really there's a three-part approach, and the left, Obama and Van Jones implemented this. I think we counter this, and it's called the top-down, bottom-up, and inside-out approach. And so the top-down is through politics. And unfortunately, that's probably the least amount of leverage that we have, but we should still be doing what we can. If we're still standing, we're still swinging, and so let's still vote. The bottom is the education. That's the bottom-up approach. And so we have to continue to spread the education to get people to change their minds, and we have to continue to spread those brush fires, and we have to get that upwelling. And then the third way is this inside-out approach, and that's where we change institutions from the inside. If you look at all this wokeism, et cetera, it's really been pushed by the corporations themselves. You know, Klaus Schwab wants a public-private partnership, again, back to Bud Light. And so we have the chance as entrepreneurs, because we're the shareholders, we're the entrepreneurs, we're the business owners, we're the investors, and we're the consumers. We're the ones that hold all the power, except we've been asleep at the wheel because we're so used to handing everything over to the nanny state. And so it's time to reclaim that, take possession of that ownership, and push the world forward, building the world we want, building it with our dollars, spending it where we want, building the world that we want through our businesses, and supporting those that do. And if we do the work, then yes, we can certainly do it.
Beautiful.
Amen.
Well, thank you all, the audience, for being here, because you're Bitcoiners. You're at the forefront of destroying legacy systems. And once we get rid of the central bank, all of these other systems will just crumble. So thank you so much. And thank you to this illustrious panel. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you, Miami, for the last 3 years in this amazing city. The whole world shut down, but Miami welcomed us with open arms. We want to show Bitcoin to the whole world. We are taking the conference on the road to set the stage for Bitcoin in a new city. Nashville. Bitcoin 2024 is coming to Nashville in Tennessee, a city that is known as a music and freedom city. Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville from July 25th to 27th.